Get around figure transformations, and what I want to discuss today is kind of how we age and especially men start to become more rounder in appearance. There's a lot of reasons why this happens. One of the main reasons that you hear me say a lot is the hips. So as men start to kind of externally rotate, the glutes become tighter, kind of pushing their center of gravity or balance kind of forward. So to offset that, they'll kind of push the belly out. So as that happens too, around our hips, glute med, glute max, kind of all the deeper ones, piriformis, all start to become really tight. And then our hip complex, because we're pushing out so much, starts to pull everything in, even up into our kind of chest area if we're not working our upper body movement patterns enough. I noticed that I started kind of distending a little bit more, too much this way. So it distorted kind of my chest, because not only should my chest adduct my arm, but it should be able to push and stabilize my shoulder complex while I'm doing a chest press or kind of moving. But all too often, maybe not doing that movement enough, or because of tightness or whatever the reason is, we're kind of doing too much adduction and not enough kind of, again, driving, kind of squeezing the chest. So I'll make some videos tomorrow about upper body movements if you follow along on some of the chest exercises I've done. As you do this, a little bit harder for women depending on kind of size of chest and things like this, but this is what will happen is kind of everything will start to kind of drop. So, I'm starting to work the tissue because my pec comes all the way down into my xiphoid process. So it scoops all the way in and comes up. And, I had a rib indentation since I was younger, and I realized I got this kind of cable tightness on my rectus abdominis running straight down, and it caused the rib to kind of flare, if you will. More than likely to posture, being right hand dominant, things like that all contribute to it, but I even notice like with a lot of women, they'll kind of get this rib flare here. A lot of them, that's because they're pulling in so tight. Now a lot of this isn't even possible until you start loosening the tissue in the hips and around, but if you do, you can start to work the upper body, kind of pec region, lat, shoulder, deltoid. All this stuff's got to get looser. And as we start to do that, now I can start to kind of work where my kind of rectus abdominis attaches, my pec starts to begin, and just kind of loosen this tissue. Much better. I did a shoulder workout today, so it's probably not the best day to do this. Be a little bit better on chest and back day. But I just want to follow that tissue all the way around. I can work it all the way up into, my shoulder. The other big thing is your deltoid. It becomes so tight and kind of rigid through here because our shoulders go up. A lot of times, proper posture. I had a client asking me about it the other day. The hard part is you got to get the fascia loose enough, and you got to get in enough kind of, I hate to use the word shape, but we got to get the shoulder down and depressed. So I got to have enough flexibility to kind of upright my kind of traps and then depress the shoulder down and in. This is what's going to give you your kind of more taper going into the deltoid if I can keep it depressed. If this starts to come up, it's going to get more rounder in appearance over time. This is what happens to a lot of people. Again, the whole job of the deltoid is to abduct the arm. So again, like lateral delt raise coming up. So over time, it starts to pull the humerus up, and the tissue in here just ends up so short and tight. You got to understand, we got a lot of muscles coming in and converging in one spot. So it becomes really tight and restricted. So this is just kind of one spot where you want to start to kind of break this up. And I might come in, kind of get up underneath here. This is where a lot of people have a lot of issues. You have your serratus that comes in here, your lat. Your serratus attaches to the back of the shoulder, and unless you're getting these full extensions quite often, which I realized even I wasn't, in martial arts or boxing, this is where those types of movements become really helpful, and I like to use them a lot with my clients because it elicits these big movement patterns. More so also the timing, and gets this fascia moving. The worst thing you want to do though is do something like that with somebody who's like too tense. you got to teach them how to basically learn how to relax into these different movements and angles. This is where a combination of stick fighting, even knife, JDK is really helpful for that stuff. Combination of movement patterns, because again, maybe just running boxing, people are just very stiff and tight, and especially if they're not doing it in a sparring sense, they don't get the same sense because, you know, nobody's fighting back, so they're really reaching and lunging in. So, you know, if you're working a heavy bag all the time and you're not really inexperienced with it, it can kind of change or alter your perception on how things should be. So sometimes it's good to, you know, maybe do some light sparring or something with somebody. I'm going to work in on this side, and in and under. Again, a lot of times I just want to hold. You know, I'm moving, and I shouldn't do that. Try not to demonstrate it that way. So I can feel my shoulders kind of wanting to drop. Again, I'm sitting right here on my serratus. That's the other thing that gave me my rib flare too, is, you know, I just never was reaching enough with my left arm. More with my right, you know, playing basketball, throwing a baseball. This is why your kind of left and right are not equal. It's very hard to get them anywhere close to resembling the same movement. So I started trying to throw baseballs or medicine balls with my left arm. You know, as much as you can work that alternate movement pattern, swinging a baseball bat or any kind of opposite movement that you do, you know, because again, even in boxing, you tend to take a left lead, where again, it's helpful to work in that right side. Just, you know, usually feels awkward. And again, if the hips are too tight, it alters that movement and performance all too often. And if we're not kind of professionally doing this, we're spending a lot of time in different functional movement patterns of altering variety. It's really hard to get in and kind of hit all your bases. So it's one thing I've been researching kind of my whole career is, you know, how to get in enough variety to elicit the biggest responses and changes. Kind of what exercises are those? What can I do with percussion therapy? Another great one is to kind of get into this area here. And as well as here. Because if I stretch my pec, but I don't have anywhere to go with my shoulder, then it doesn't really make any sense. So you got to make sure that when you're doing this, you're being systematic and understanding on how the body kind of tightens. And again, it's different for everybody. Not completely, but you know, if you're lefty, it's going to be different. If you're righty, depending on the sport you play, depending on how much physical activity you get, depending on your age, there's a million factors that come into this. And this is where like a good assessment comes into play, to understand how that person's moving and what you can start to do to fix them. And then understanding what the person will do on their own, and making sure that you're doing those things with them in person. Any questions, comments on this? Please feel free to reach out, ask questions. Appreciate it. Thank you.